So once again, everybody, welcome to the Killing Administrator Fighting Back Against Admin Rights webinar. My name is Nick Calavancia. I am the VP of Windows Management at ScriptLogic. I'm joined today by Greg Shields, MVP and Partner Principal Technologist at Concentrated Technologies. And today we're going to talk a little bit about admin rights and what you can do about it. I'm really glad to have Greg with us today. If you've seen Redmond Magazine, Windows IT Pro, been to TechEd, VMworld, Tech Mentor, just about, I think, everywhere on the planet with regard to Microsoft and IT, Greg's been there either talking or writing or blogging or doing something about Windows technologies, and we're really glad to have him. He does a lot of our webinars with us, and we're pleased to have you. So, Greg, welcome today. I appreciate you coming aboard.
Thank you, Nick.
And so let me just tell you real quickly about ScriptLogic, and then we're going to jump into the webinar content. We've been around for about 11 years or so. We focus on 4 key areas of Windows management, management of the desktops, the help desk, of Active Directory, and server. And server includes Windows, SharePoint, SQL, and Exchange. I always like to say we focus on the 4 key areas of management and that which is consistent across every enterprise, meaning everybody has desktops and everybody has a help desk and so on. And our products seek to centralize, automate, and simplify what you all do on a daily basis. So we take the approach of thinking about the tasks that you're trying to accomplish and the problems you're trying to solve, and then centralize, automate, and simplify that with solutions. You see we have about 31,000 customers, ranges everywhere from the very small SMB business, could be even 10 seats, all the way to the Fortune 100. I think our largest was something like 110 or 150,000 seats. It depends on what day we're talking about. And we are headquartered in sunny Boca Raton, Florida, a little north of Fort Lauderdale. And we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Quest Software, have been since 2007. So while we're a member of the single largest ISV family in the world, we do continue to create, sell, and support our own software. So let me go ahead, Greg, and just jump into talking about admin rights. And I'll go ahead and drive the slides, and let's just jump into this, Greg.
Well, thanks, Nick, and thanks all of you for spending some time out of the middle of your day. You're exactly right, Nick. I think this is a great topic for today because, people are trying to figure out how best to secure the operating system that has for a long time almost been laughable in some of its insecurities. And today, I think what we realize is that some of the more modern approaches towards really securing the Windows operating system are somewhat different in a lot of ways than what we ever thought of before. We spent a lot of time dealing with patching and applying lockdowns and things like that. But a more modern approach today towards really fixing the operating system and fixing one of Windows' biggest necessary evil, go ahead and hit the next slide there, is working on administrator privileges. Think about the laptops and the desktops in your environment as you're going through those laptops and desktops and how they get impacted by whether it's viruses or malware or misconfigurations that cause downtime. In a lot of cases, the widespread distribution of administrator privileges are Windows' unfortunate but necessary evil. They were built into Windows, right? They're not going anywhere, and for the most part, up until really these new solutions, this new class of solutions that's really come out, the standard user rights has not been powerful enough to support the needs of users. So we have this sort of weird situation where the things that we have available to us are kind of a binary on-off approach, right? I either give people standard user rights or I give them administrator rights. And there hasn't been anything in the middle. There's been really no gray area with Windows. So this whole evil in administrator creates a really big problem. You either have administrator or you don't have administrator. And the ultimate realization is that I think a lot of us understand what we're looking for is some subset of administrator. Now, at least when I think about it, the goal here is to just get rid of administrator, or as you can see up on the screen, our goal today is just to off them. Because having administrator out in the environment is just really a bad idea. So it's eliminating administrator from eliminating the person that is administrator, or the actual individual person that you think of as administrator from the whole notion of administrator rights, in a lot of ways solves 3 really big problems in our environment today. And I want to kind of spend some time focusing on what these 3 problems are. to help you understand how you might come towards some solutions that can assist with this. Number one is getting to this whole notion of least privilege. And I'll talk a little bit about least privilege here in just a minute, but what I think a lot of us have come to the awareness of is that way back in, gosh, I think it was back in the 50s, the U.S. Department of Defense identified this notion of what least privilege is, and we've known that it was there. We've known that this is something that we wanted to do, but we haven't been able to resolve it with the native tools that have been provided for us. And so the first problem that we want to actually address by killing administrator is to sort of wipe away the entirety of what we think of as administrator or standard user and replace it with a real least privilege approach. So I'll talk about that here in just a second, because that's only the first of the three problems. The second one is taking that on versus off notion of administrator versus non-administrator and getting to this granular privilege management mindset. So our first problem is just getting to least privilege. The second problem is, how do we actually get there? What's the evolution from on versus off to least privilege, to this granular privilege management? And then the third problem is in really finding rules and the instances of rules that actually work for what your needs are. Now, you'll find out here in just a second, there are solutions out there that they provide a way for you to apply this notion of least privilege or to apply the privilege rules that you might want to use in your environment. But the instances of these rules, as you'll find out in just a second, those are really the hard part. Having the rule catalog might be relatively easy, but finding which one specifically makes sense is a bit more challenging. Now, I'll tell you this. The Windows operating system can't do this. With the Windows operating system alone, you have not really the ability to get there. You're going to need some external tools to assist, and we'll talk about, and me and Nick will talk about some of what these external tools are here in just a minute. I have to, however, frame this whole problem space around that whole notion of least privilege. And to me, it really does a really good job of identifying what it is we're seeking to do with these sorts of solutions. So this comes from the U.S. Department of Defense. I've essentially grabbed this off of the website there. It's been around for decades. The principle of least privilege requires that each subject in the system, any person, any user, any actor in that system, be granted the most restrictive set of privileges that are needed for the performance of authorized tasks. And so I've underlined those there because those are what's really important. So a person, right, the individual that's working with the system, needs to be given whatever it is they need to be given so that they can do what it is they need to do, but nothing more. Now, by applying that, so by using this notion here of most restrictive set and authorized tasks, we actually limit the damage that can result from accident, error, or unauthorized use. So this is a security issue, but it is at the same time also a protect yourself from your own users sort of issue. Now, getting to least privilege, right? This is problem one. What least privilege decides, as I said before, for you to do is to give that most restrictive set of privilege needed for the performance of authorized tasks. Now, least privilege wants to do this because doing so essentially protects you from those users. How do you do this? Okay, how do we get from, all right, I've got my administrator here, and I can think of that administrator from like a stoplight, right? I've got a red light here. Okay, you are not administrator. I've got a green light, and you are administrator. This is a very small box of potential options that I have for delivering access to my users. Oh, you need to be able to change the system time? Okay, I got to give you administrator. Oh, you need to be able to install applications. Oh, I got to give you administrator. There's the throttle that I have available to determine what sorts of privileges I give to someone is not very granular in nature. What I really want to do is, instead of having one throttle, okay, are you an admin or are you not an admin, I want to fracture all of the different potential actions that a person might want to be able to do into more or less a catalog of different potential things. With that catalog, then, I have a much larger set of stoplights that I could turn off or on for users based off of what they might need to do. So you might not need to change the time or add ActiveX controls or configure the network or change properties, but you might need to install software. And so with a least privilege management solution, what I get is a much larger list of these nice stoplights that identify, okay, for this user, I want to assign what sorts of privileges they can do. Now, implementing least privilege in a lot of ways means thinking outside of the box of Windows rights. What you may be thinking right now is, well, Greg, I can do this with Windows today. I can give them power user, or I can give them, I don't know, network service, or I can change the NTFS permissions and various things. And that's entirely possible, but it's one of those approaches towards solving the problem that I think you know as well as I do that has failed significantly in the past. If you've ever been involved with that situation where the administrator who just got their MCSE or ITP credentials has decided that they're going to go through and change the NTFS perms on every single Windows executable in System 32, you know that this just doesn't work. So what you have to kind of do is think outside the box of Windows rights and instead look towards creating a catalog of the possible actions a user might need to accomplish. So here's this big catalog. Again, ActiveX controls or installing applications or whatever. This catalog is essentially the master list of all the things that somebody could want to do or potentially want to do. From that, then you have to identify the specific instances of each item in the catalog. Okay, I don't know, what apps do you want to install? What properties do you want to allow? What applications do you want to elevate? These are all specific instances of those actions that may be tagged to specific applications or specific properties or things you need to elevate that you then tag, once again, to users by role. Ultimately, what you want to do when you're getting to least privilege is map users to the specific actions and instances that they should have privilege or the rights to be able to do in your environment. Easy enough. Now, I'm guessing at this point, as I said, you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, doesn't this exist in Windows today? Right? Doesn't Windows have functionality that allows me to do this? It kind of does. I mean, we've got user account control today. Right? With UAC, and I don't know how many people here still have UAC turned on. UAC, one of the ideas behind UAC was that every person, whether you're a user, standard user, or an administrator, really only exists as a standard user until they do something that requires that administrator token. Now, only administrators in UAC actually get elevated when they attempt to use that token. So this works if you're a person you're already supposed to be an administrator in the first place. It doesn't work, however, if you are the type of person that shouldn't be an administrator. Right? UAC is very much person-centric by nature. So you're an admin, but you're going to stay as standard user until it comes time for you to actually be an admin. Least privilege is action-centric instead of person-centric. So you need to be able to change the system time or install an application. Well, all right, the application and the fact that you can install that application is what least privilege is much more interested in. Now, at this point, Nick, I think you've got a slide coming up.
Let me just jump in here. So what I'm going to do is kind of introduce you all to Privilege Authority. And generally speaking, we have webinars like this where we kind of do the what's free and what's paid sort of a format. I'd be pitching you a product that's completely paid and you'd have to spend money on it. But Privilege Authority is the lowest cost privilege management solution you find in the market because there's actually a free edition for you. So with things that Greg's talking about where you can't exactly do it with Windows for free, you do have the ability to do it for free, as well as there's a paid version. You can see, I know you guys can read the slide here yourself, but there's a community edition, which has some limited functionality, but it's certainly a feature-rich privilege management solution. Only uses community-based support, does access our community that I'll give you a URL for later on. But there's also a professional edition that starts at $12 a seat that has some advanced features, which, again, I'll point out to you. And it comes with standard technical support. So the first thing in kind of addressing getting to truly to least privilege, as Greg's talked about, I want to point out a couple of aspects of the product. And I'm going to do a couple of demos throughout Greg's presentation. That way Greg is able to kind of cover the topics and kind of keep us as sort of a moderator and proctor of this presentation of the webinar. And I'm going to kind of show some things and how Privilege Authority So in trying to establish least privilege, we're obviously trying to get out of that on-off binary, you're admin or you're not, and instead define the individual levels of permissions. Haven't even gotten yet to the actions yet. Greg's going to talk a little bit more about the actions in a couple of minutes, although he touched on it a bit, but more so just from the standpoint of establishing least privilege and what rights are you able to utilize and to exercise at a far more granular level than just admin. So let me jump over to my remote desktop, and you should be able to see here Privilege Authority version 2.5. This is a solution that utilizes group policies to push out the policies. And I'm not going to be able to do a full demonstration here because that's not really the point. I'm really trying to touch on the aspect of the product that relate to what Greg's discussing during the webinar. We'll, of course, take some questions at the end if you have any, and I'll be happy to show you anything else if I can. And so just trying to show you here as an example, I've got a policy here of allowing the time and date change when launched from the taskbar. Now, that may seem rather mundane. You're going, seriously, that's how powerful this product is? You're going to let me change the date and time? Yeah. Actually, think about what Greg's trying to talk about, where let's remove admin rights completely so that the user can't really screw up their own machine. That means the user can't even do something like change the date and time or install an app or do an update or anything on the machine potentially. And so what we're trying to do is come up with the individual rules of the things that you'd like to be able to accomplish. But in getting to that least privilege, the first level of granularity we have to allow access is to establish what groups that the security token is going to be updated to allow the process to run as. So the grayed out button here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to come back to some of these other tabs, so don't feel like you're out of place, like, hey, wait a second, you skipped. I haven't skipped. I'm just trying to do it kind of in the order that we're discussing it. But the first thing is to be able to give you the rights as administrator if I want to. So even if you don't have administrator, we can allow something to run as if you were administrator behind the scenes. We can, of course, take that a little bit more detailed than that. If I want to add a group in, if there's a specific group that's maybe on the domain that you've given rights to through either a local group or directly, maybe through group policies, you can establish any other group as well would have rights, and you'd run as that group. But of course, that typically means that a group that's been given rights other than, let's say, administrators or domain admins, which has the local admin rights, we'd have to grant some permissions locally on the desktop, probably through a group policy. So rather than having to do it through a group policy separately, we do have this privileges tab here. And these privileges, if you've worked in group policies at all, specifically over in the security areas where you're granting rights to the operating system, these should look relatively familiar to you. And these, I'm just running through these real quick. I'm not going to read these. You can do that yourself. But these should look somewhat familiar where you're seeing things like, let's say, shutting down the system time or changing the system time or or taking ownership of files and other objects and so on. And we're giving you the ability to granularly give those privileges to a particular policy and therefore to a particular user when they want to accomplish a task. So, so the first thing that we're trying to do is kind of a level set here is in trying to get to least privilege. We have that ability with privilege authority in order to establish by group and even by individual privilege what permissions need to be granted. But we're going to take it a couple steps further and talk about the specific actions someone wants to do with those rights. Once they've gotten those admin rights or got those privileges, what can they do with it, usefully do with it in the operating system? So let me jump back into the slides here. And Greg, let's just jump into the second problem.
Yeah, that second problem, and I think you highlighted it fairly well, is getting there. And it's important to recognize that eliminating the administrator is not something that's going to happen overnight, because there are a lot of use cases where, I mean, if this were something that could happen overnight, it would be very simple. You pull admin and you're all a standard user, but that's not how this works. You have developers, for example, that need application installations, or you've got those sales users out on the road that need some sort of special consideration because they happen to be out on the road. And even some applications themselves require elevation when they're not properly coded or whenever they have needs of different files that go beyond what standard user is. So getting there isn't going to happen overnight because you have to kind of spend some time thinking about what the use cases are of various people. Where you're going to spend your time, right, is in figuring out what the mapping is between three different elements: the users you have, the possible actions that they might need to do, and then what of those actions are actually permitted. I got three nice little graphics here, and that really highlights the three pieces that come together to actually create the notion of least privilege. That's what we're going for here. I've got a catalog of actions up at the top, so these are sort of all the possible things that could happen. I have a directory of users, which are the people I want to apply this to, and then I have the list of policies down at the bottom that are what sorts of behaviors my business considers to be acceptable. All right, so let's take a look at these one at a time. So thing one here is, all right, I need this catalog of actions, and there's a whole series of them, changing time, installing software, ActiveX controls, all of that kind of classic stuff that you think of in terms of potential actions that a person might need to do in a system. Now, an effective privilege management solution will deliver this catalog via some sort of administrative console. So if you, and Nick's already sort of shown this, through an administrative console, you should be able to see what this catalog of actions is and be able to select from them. With this catalog, then, the next thing you have is a directory of users, or the thing that you need. Now, this part's really easy, right? Because for most of us, the directory of users is something we already have. It's our active directory. It's the groups we've already created. We've almost, in many ways, and I'm sure that this is how your Active Directory groups, users and groups structure is set up, you have probably already created the roles that you need to by virtue of the groups and organizational units that are in your Active Directory. I mean, you probably have a finance group, a sales group, an executive group, and then from there, specific subgroups within those groups. And those are defined in a lot of ways because, I mean, the finance people need to have different information than the salespeople, which need to have different information from the executives. So you've kind of probably, in some ways, already defined what your roles are, your user roles, in your organization. Now, the third thing is a list of policies. Right? Now, these are not necessarily technical in nature. They're more procedural in nature. Okay, while your company's policies may be already documented in a format that helps translate, so you have these documents, right? You have a user acceptable use policy. You have a security policy. You have the charter that determines what different teams are supposed to be doing, and they may not necessarily directly translate into actions on the system, but they probably give you a general understanding or a general just guidance in terms of what actions are to be considered approved. And so the third piece here is really taking those existing policy documents and then translating them into a set of user actions that you can then ultimately map into users. So it's policies start first, even though they're thing 3 here. The policies drive the users, and the users drive what the actions are. All 3 of these ultimately combine to create what is this thing that I keep calling least privilege. I have users. The users are given the responsibilities to do whatever they need to do by virtue of my corporate policies, and all of those are enabled via that catalog of actions. So at this point, all right, now we've further defined what least privilege is. And you're probably still thinking at this point, isn't this also in Windows? Yes, in a lot of ways it is. Windows today, Windows 7 and Enterprise Edition has AppLocker. Now, Windows 7 and AppLocker, AppLocker first and foremost is only available in the Enterprise version of Windows. And AppLocker is designed to facilitate really the central control of execution and elevation of applications. So I can use AppLocker to lock out applications or to enable applications for elevation. This is where it works well. Where AppLocker kind of fails is in the fact that AppLocker is very executable-centric. If you actually look through the AppLocker group policies, right, you can actually see they're kind of buried in the back, the group policy management editor. And if you look at AppLocker, it really focuses on 3 things: the executables, the MSIs, and then the scripts that are out there. And so this isn't really a catalog of actions. This is not so much directly mapping into the things you need a user to be able to do. It's more focused on the items, the different elements that comprise the Windows operating system. So what you're really looking for, I think, is a way to specifically target where you want privileges to go. Nick?
So the privilege authority provides some of that granularity. The real challenge there, since you have the directory, you already have your corporate policies, which are dictating what people should and shouldn't be doing. More in general, the trick is building that catalog of actions. And so privilege authority provides these action-based policies. Now, the challenge is going to be you still have to kind of define, in some cases, what the action is in the operating system. Sometimes it takes a little bit of detective work to figure that out. I'll show you where it actually helps, where we can help figure that out for you. But we also help provide some granularity in the actions by defining each individual action, and then also provide some granularity in dynamically targeting who's allowed to perform those actions using, you can see here, 18 base criteria and then some Boolean operators. I always like to say to become exponentially more granular, if you use an AND statement in your Boolean operators, you can say if A and B and C and D, and I'll show you what I mean. It becomes very, very granular, so even if you have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of users, you can very quickly narrow down that subset of users, those 5, those 10, that 1 is supposed to be able to do this particular action. So let me jump over and do a quick demonstration of this. Still on this same editing of the rule, remember this is my allow the date and time change when launched from the taskbar. First thing I'm going to show you here is how we can define the granular actions. There's 4 different types of ways to define actions with privilege authority. You have by path to the executable. So you can see here is an example of where I've got a specific path and a set of arguments. You can establish a file hash if you'd like. And that's, of course, to make sure that someone doesn't, let's say, rename. If you use like even with group policies, you have the ability to do the whitelist and blacklisting. But I can, if I just say you can allow Notepad, I can rename Rogue App A to Notepad and it'll run. And so file hash will help with that. And then also you see by certificate down at the bottom. We can do it by folder path, and it changes a little bit. Put what folders in there, and that way anything within a certain folder can run. By ActiveX rule, you put the source URL for the ActiveX control that's going to run. And then by digital certificate, and the digital certificate, a good example of that is maybe you want any of the patches from Microsoft to update. Maybe you want to have any updates from Adobe to run. See, that way you don't have to define each individual application. You can have more of a broad stroke approach to, about to say your allowance. That doesn't make any sense. To your allowing of the elevation. And so so I've got the path here to the executable. And then, of course, I have, as well for granularity, I have the platforms. I can specify what platforms they're going to run on. If I have nothing checked, everything's allowed to run for the rule. So basically any system below will run. But you can see I can do it based off of server and workstation. That way I can differentiate. Maybe I have certain rules that I want to allow on a workstation but not on a server, so someone can't elevate rights on a server, maybe hack into the Exchange box or whatever the case is. And then by operating system, you see everything from XP to 7 on the desktop side, to the client side, and then 2003 server all the way to Server 2008 R2 on the server side. So I have that a way to target platforms. And then I have our validation logic rule to take it a step further. And this gives us it looks like another 10 different levels of targeting where I can do it based off of, you see here, based on membership, like the computers in a specific group, the users in a specific group, username, the OU of the computer or the user, the computer name, IP ranges, and the registry and files existing. And I can add those in. And then again, I have a Boolean operators here, these and or statements you see in the very center of the dialog box, that if I was to add more of these in, it would let me again become exponentially more granular, because now I can say, let's only do it if you're on a workstation and it's Windows XP, and you're in a particular computer group, and you're on a particular IP version 4 subnet, and very quickly, if you do have those tens of thousands of users, as the example might be, you very quickly can see how you can narrow down to the 100 to 50, the 10 to 5 to 1 that has that particular need, and then can have that elevated out. So I have that ability, very easily with privilege authority to establish what the action catalog looks like. And I have just a couple of here that you can see. WebEx meeting ActiveX control. In this case, it's actually doing it by ActiveX rule, and you see it's anything from webex.com. I showed you the one here, they allow the date and time. Here's Adobe installers with a digital certificate, and it's anything from Adobe Systems Incorporated, and so on. And so there's different ways of doing this, and the trick is going to be to find out exactly how Windows defines that action. As an example, if I just really quickly go back to my allowing date and time here, and you see here to run this, it's running the run32 DLL, but it's actually with these specific arguments being run in order to define that action. So that's going to be where some of the challenges, and I think that's what Greg's kind of talking about as one of the problems in getting to least privilege, is defining that granularity. This is something that you're going to have to do. But as Greg's going to talk about in the next challenge and problem to getting to least privilege, that there are some resources there to help you in order to find these rules so that you're not alone doing it on your own. There's actually a way to expand and utilize the IT community as a whole in order to help you with this. So let's jump back into the slides. And Greg, let's talk about problem 3.
Sure. After telegraphing my problem 3, I'll go ahead and talk about it.
Sure. Thank you.
Nick's right, in fact, that finding the rules that work is in a lot of ways, at least as I see it, is in a lot of ways kind of the hard part, and in many ways is the most important part here, because having that catalog of actions is one thing. Knowing that you've got this long list of possible things that you can do is great, but if you don't actually know the specific action instances that make sense for what you need to do, that's a completely other situation entirely. The third thing you got to have, obviously, and this is sort of what Nick was alluding to, is the fact that it's nice to have a nice clearinghouse, as it were, of all the potential action instances that exist. Now, it's very important at this point to recognize that just installing a privilege management solution doesn't automatically bring least privilege. When you install that least management solution, right, you create what is essentially a framework by which you can then create those rules in those rule instances. And so the solution is the facilitator for adding in what makes sense for your particular environment and your environment needs. So having that framework is what allows you to map your users to what the policy-approved actions are. And really finding the rules that work is what the significant challenge really becomes whenever you implement this solution. So you can't just light this thing up and expect everything to magically appear and work. The real solution is it kind of takes a community of people to really understand and to really get a feel for what other people are doing in solving their own problems, right? Getting the rules that work requires an entire community of people that are following this whole notion, this evolved notion of least privilege. And an effective solution will really allow you to kind of share what you've learned with other people, and also to gather what other people have learned and then to steal it for your own uses. If you have that nice clearinghouse, you can steal their work for your purposes, while at the same time you're sharing what you've learned with them. So the result is that everybody kind of gets to this whole least privilege thing much more cleanly and much faster then. So you may be asking yourself, okay, well, who really needs a community? And it kind of makes sense. Like, your organization is different than every other organization out there, so what makes sense for you may not necessarily make sense for other people. But the question I kind of think of is, is Google really your friend in this situation? Is it really helpful for you to spend all that time trying to figure out, well, all right, this might make sense, or that might make sense, or this application might make sense, or that application might make sense? If somebody's already figured out Live Meeting and how to work with it in the publisher cert, if you need to figure out Firefox, why reinvent the wheel when you can have some sort of community out there that is specifically driven by people that are trying to resolve this problem of privilege management?
So let me talk a little bit about the Privilege Authority community. And actually, before I even do that, let me just do a quick demonstration of how I even got, this is back to that date and time change, how I even got this set of arguments. Because obviously, you could Google it, to Greg's point. I actually figured this out by running a feature set we have here that basically says test the rule. And it's going to go through and make sure the client's installed. It's going to refresh the group policy, which is what it's doing right now. And then it's going to bring up a box that says, hey, after you press continue, I'm going to be watching the operating system and watching the things you do and make sure the thing that you do matches what's in the rule. And so I'm just going to kind of here click continue. And if you watch here, and I come down here to the operating system and I say, let's adjust the date and time. All right, it should come up here and it ran and it matches. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here because that's all I really wanted to get that far. But if you notice here, it automatically showed me what I was doing, the path, and then here is that command line that actually got run the entire time, right? So that's actually how I came about doing it. So part of the Privilege Authority is helping me do this. And Microsoft even has some tools, though, when they came out with it for Windows 2003, I believe, a couple years back, where people were trying to run applications, and it would show them what registry entries and what file paths were necessary. And some of that kind of a tool could even be kind of helpful here as well. But we do provide you with some ability to at least figure out what's been run when you're trying to accomplish a certain task, so you're not left alone on your own. But to Greg's point about it taking a community, I have my own rules here, but we also can access this rule database that we have at privilegeauthority.com. And at privilegeauthority.com, there's a set of forums there and so on. But there's also a set of rules that have been created either by people at ScriptLogic, by the community as a whole. They get rated periodically. And the idea here is back to Greg's point of you can find a rule that somebody else has already made that either A, works spot on as soon as you load it. It might not. Keep in mind this is a community, right? So that means that some people are going to give bad suggestions. We've all seen the on like FailBlog, the Yahoo Answers. If you haven't, I suggest you go do that. But people ask a question, you just cannot believe that someone's asking you that question, and then someone gives a really stupid answer. Well, that's part of a community. Every village has its idiot, right, Greg?
Indeed.
I wasn't implying that Greg's the idiot. It was just, he's saying it takes a village, it takes a community. So, but there's always an idiot in every village. So you're going to get some stupid answers. It means you're going to have some people that are going to submit some rules that are just, they're okay. They're not great. They're not perfectly spot on. But you know what? If nothing else, it's a step in the right direction. In other cases, you're getting great rules, like here, ones that are verified by our ScriptLogic support team. We're having rules that actually have been shown to work perfectly. And they're supported by the ScriptLogic support staff if you have the professional edition of the product. So, and then the idea here is I can take one of these rules, like let's say I'll take here the Bing toolbar that I want to get installed, and I can go ahead and I can import it and automatically creates a rule for me, pulls all the information in for me, so I don't have to do it myself, and then I can establish what groups, what platforms, if I want to do any more validation logic. And then in this case, there's an extra tab here, a GPO tab that you haven't seen before. That's because the other rule was already associated with a group policy. Now I can go ahead and associate with a particular group policy and hit finish, and I'm done. So I can not only pull rules in that other people have created, but I can also then go ahead and take a rule, and if I want to here, I can just right-click and I can go ahead and share it with the Rules Exchange, and I'd have to provide some credentials. They would push it out to the Rules Exchange. So there's this benefit of you providing some rules in the hopes, of course, that other people are going to participate in the same fashion, and then give you a set of rules there. So let me just real quickly then talk about some of the feature sets that are different between the free and the professional edition. I'm running professional. Professional has a reporting capability you see at the bottom right-hand side, bottom left-hand side, your other right-hand side, where you can see the elevation activity, what privileges have been deployed, and then just reports of the configuration of the rules, so you have them in a more of a laid-out version. So those are there. Those come in the professional edition. They're not available in the free edition. The other thing in the free edition is that you do not have digital certificates. That's something that's only in professional. The rules, all the validation logic is in the professional edition as well. And then the other big differentiator is that the professional edition has support, and the free edition is like community supported. Now you might say that's that's not a big deal. To some people, it actually is. We put this the free edition out as purely community, as a way of kind of testing the model to ask people what they wanted in a professional edition. And one of the very first pieces of feedback we got were people saying, we had like 16,000 downloads of Privilege Authority, the community edition, when we first put it out. And a lot of times people were telling us, I need it to be supported. I can't put it on my production network unless it's supported. I mean, truly supported, like by a support department. So we found that that was something people wanted, but then there's a lot of people that just want a free edition. So we give them the ability to at least do some of the privilege elevation without needing support. So keep in mind that you can take, even if you have the free edition, if someone has a rule that that maybe has some validation logic in it or something like that, and you import it, what happens with the free edition just strips that part out. So if someone happens to have a digital certificate rule, it's not going to run inside the free edition, but anything else in there, like the path, the folder path, the ActiveX rule, that'll all work. So that's all built into the product. So there's that rules exchange. You have the ability to go ahead and both share and pull down rules that others have shared with you, as well as a set of forums where you can discuss, hey, I can't get this to work, and someone might have a suggestion for you, so you can interact with your colleagues there as well. So I think, actually, Greg, this is one of your last slides, come to think of it.
I think this is my last slide. But really,
Greg.
Thank you. In my mind, our industry in IT has spent the entirety of its history working on protecting our environment and protecting our assets from the bad people outside. And privilege management, in many ways, helps us also protect our environment from the bad things that are involved with our own users. Now, we have for a very long time done so via an almost draconian sort of top-down, we will tell you what you need to accomplish. And finding the right balance, I think, that we've learned, especially recently with the whole consumerization of IT initiatives that have been going on in a lot of places, finding the right balance between security and productivity is something that we are now recognizing needs to be done. The only way you can do that is by taking a granular approach. You can't do it with just administrator rights alone. And you really can't get it with privilege management alone. You can't do it yourself. Really doing this in a way that's going to be seamless for your users requires a community, and so be part of that community.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. A couple of resource details here for you guys. You can see this, where to get the product. Privilege Authority is available at privilegeauthority.com. The professional edition is available at ScriptLogic's website, scriptlogic.com/PA, of course, short for Privilege Authority. Greg works for Concentrated Technologies, and he's available at concentratedtech.com. And while we have your attention, since you're obviously interested in technical topics and trying to figure out what can I do with native tools, what can I do for free, what kind of tips and tricks are available to me, and that's one of the reasons why you're here, is to listen to industry experts. You can also find a lot of Greg's writing on a microsite that's part of ScriptLogic's website that we call SMB IT Simplified. While it focuses on topics that are related to the small and mid-sized business, it's not exclusive to that. If you're in an enterprise environment where you have 5,000, 10,000 seats, the content here really still applies to you. The idea is that these are real-world articles written by experts. Greg is one of them. He writes for us very frequently. And they're what I like to call vendor-agnostic articles. That is, they're not about ScriptLogic products at all. They're not even like the webinar today, where there's kind of what you really need is to buy a ScriptLogic product, subtly. That's not even it. This is content that is purely about, here's how you do something with the event viewer, and it's a whole article on how to do stuff with event viewer, or with PowerShell scripting, or whatever it is. So I highly recommend you go take a look at that with us. And then you can connect with us down on, you see, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, even email. We have a newsletter. We are having giveaways periodically where we're giving away, as long as you're connected with us, we're giving away. So maybe it might be an Amazon gift card, might be that kind of thing. We usually put that up on the site as well. So make sure you kind of keep an eye out for that and have the ability to go ahead and potentially win something. Just by even belonging and following SMB IT Simplified. If you follow with us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and so on, the articles, as appropriate, are going to be then published on those sites so that you can constantly be updated on the content, because it's being updated very frequently. You're seeing every couple of days there's a number of new articles. So this isn't stagnant content. It's very fresh stuff. Just again, going back to two things. Again, Privilege Authority, the community edition is available at privilegeauthority.com. And of course, you can use the community with the professional edition. It works. But the professional edition is available through scriptlogic.com/PA. Greg's available at concentratedtech.com. And then the last thing, again, take a look at our SMB IT Simplified site, scriptlogic.com/SMBIT, and take a look at some of the real-world articles. Make sure you subscribe and get some really good, viable, real-world content that's going to help you with your job, because we'd like to be able to do that. So it looks like that's about it. No more questions. So everyone, thank you for your time.